On the 23rd of March 2017, a ship pulled into the port of Rotterdam carrying 20,170 containers, more than any vessel had ever carried in the entire history of commercial shipping. Nobody had told the world this was coming. It wasn't a Maersk ship. It wasn't an MSC ship. The two companies that had spent a decade racing each other to build the world's biggest container vessels. It belonged to a shipping company most people outside Japan had never heard of. A company with no history of chasing size records. A company that, until that morning, had been considered reliable, competent, and utterly unremarkable. Then, 8 months later, it lost the title. Forever. This is the story of the MOL Triumph, the ship that broke a world record almost by accident. Held it for less time than a school year, and still managed to change how an entire industry thinks about scale and engineering. Because here's what nobody expected. The MOL Triumph wasn't trying to be the biggest ship on Earth. It was trying to solve a completely different problem, and the record was almost a side effect. To understand why, you have to understand who built it, and why a shipping company founded in 1884 decided to build something the world had never seen. Mitsui O.S.K. Lines, MOL as the industry calls it, traces its roots to 1884, formed from two Japanese shipping houses. These houses would eventually merge in 1964. Its history runs parallel to Japan's own industrialization, carrying raw materials into a country with almost none, rebuilding from nothing after the Second World War, and growing into one of the largest diversified shipping companies on Earth. Bulk carriers, tankers, car carriers, and container ships, all under one roof. That word, diversified, is the key to everything that follows. Maersk built its entire identity around container shipping. MSC grew explosively, betting everything on aggressive fleet expansion during the pandemic freight boom. Container ships were not just part of their business. They were the business. For MOL, container shipping was one division among several. The company did not need to win the size race to justify its existence. It did not need headlines. It needed vessels that performed well, cost-effectively, on the specific trade routes MOL served, primarily linking Asia to Europe and North America. For a company whose broader fleet already moved iron ore, crude oil, and finished automobiles across every ocean on Earth. So when MOL's engineers sat down to design what would become the Triumph, they were not chasing a record. They were solving a narrower problem. How do you build a vessel large enough to capture scale economics without the usual operational compromises? The answer they arrived at was 20,170 TEU, a number that happened, almost as a byproduct of good engineering, to exceed every container ship built before it. The MOL Triumph is approximately 400 meters long and 58.8 meters wide, dimensions in the same general range as the ultra-large vessels we've discussed. But the specific choices behind those dimensions reflect a different set of priorities than the vessels built by Maersk or MSC. Japanese shipbuilding, represented here by Imabari Shipbuilding, the yard that constructed the Triumph, has a distinct engineering culture. Where some European and Chinese yards have pursued maximum theoretical capacity, Japanese naval architecture has historically prioritized operational efficiency across the vessel's full service life. That means focusing on fuel consumption per container moved, structural longevity, and the practical realities of port turnaround time. The Triumph's hull form reflects this. Its bow is optimized through extensive computational fluid dynamics modeling to minimize wave-making resistance at typical service speeds. It is a design choice that trades a small amount of theoretical maximum capacity for meaningfully lower fuel consumption across tens of thousands of nautical miles. Over a 25-year service life, that trade-off compounds into millions of dollars in operating cost savings. The vessel's propulsion system uses a single large two-stroke diesel engine, tuned specifically for MOL's Asia-Europe service pattern. MOL's engineers modeled the vessel's expected speed profile across its actual planned routes before finalizing engine specifications. The bridge, the ship's command structure, is positioned unusually far aft, closer to the stern than on many competing designs. This placement maximizes the unbroken deck space available for container stowage forward of the bridge, squeezing additional capacity out of the same hull. It is a small decision, multiplied across a 400-meter hull, that separates a good container ship from a merely large one. When naval architects outside Japan examined the Triumph's design, several noted that MOL had not built the largest possible ship its dimensions allowed. It had built the most efficient ship that happened to be the largest in the world at that moment. The record was almost incidental, a consequence of disciplined engineering, not the goal that drove it. The MOL Triumph held its title for 8 months. In November 2017, the OOCL Hong Kong surpassed it. Within a few years, the record would fall again and again, eventually landing with the MSC Gulson, and later, the MSC Arena. In an industry where the Maersk had held its record for a decade, the Triumph's 8 months might look like a footnote. But the industry did not forget it, because the Triumph proved something that mattered more than the number on its hull. It proved that a company could reach the frontier of container ship engineering through discipline rather than raw capital commitment. MOL did not outorder its competitors. It designed one exceptionally well-optimized vessel, the largest thing moving cargo across the world's oceans. The lesson rippled outward. Competing shipyards and shipping lines studied the Triumph's hull efficiency data. Techniques like refined bow geometry and aft-positioned bridge configurations appeared in subsequent vessels built by entirely different companies. The Triumph's specific record did not last. Its engineering influence outlasted the record by years. MOL never built a sister ship larger than the Triumph. The company did not chase the record once it was lost. It returned largely to the diversified conservative growth strategy that had defined it for over a century, building vessels sized for its specific trade routes. That decision tells you something important about what different shipping companies actually value. Maersk built the Maersk to prove scale economics still had room to run, and then kept building bigger ships to defend that position. MSC built an entire fleet acquisition strategy around becoming the largest container line in the world, and the MSC Arena is the current expression of that ambition. MOL built one ship that happened to be the biggest in the world, decided that was sufficient proof of what it needed to prove, and moved on. None of these strategies is wrong. Each reflects a different answer to the same underlying question: what is scale actually for? For Maersk and MSC, scale is the strategy itself. For MOL, scale was a tool, useful for exactly as long as it served a purpose. The MOL Triumph still sails today, serving Asia-Europe routes much as it was designed to. It no longer holds any records. Most people who see it in port have no idea it once carried more cargo than any ship in human history. It simply works. It works efficiently, quietly, exactly as its engineers intended from the beginning. And that, in its own way, is the more interesting story. The decades of ordinary, well-engineered service that followed. The thing the record was always meant to serve. That is the MOL Triumph. Briefly the largest ship in the world. Permanently a lesson in what engineering discipline can achieve.